Michelle is the Executive Director of EM Solutions and has worked in the nonprofit sector for more than 2 decades. Her extensive experience lies in improving strategy, governance, and sustainability and financial management. Michelle is passionate about a whole bunch of stuff, but specifically seeing NPOs achieve their full potential and create a deep and lasting impact. So please welcome to our virtual stage, Michelle Davidson.
We're going to focus on the question, when working harder isn't working anymore, then what? How do we get through the molasses that we are struggling with? And I can honestly tell you that everything that I'm going to share with you today has been really put to the test in my life in this last week. I've had to employ all the techniques to get through the week. So this is speaking from experience. I think that is the key part. And that's always what I do with my birthday bash, is I speak about stuff that has impacted me in the year, things that are relevant, that is like, something that is personal, rather than just being, a technical exercise. Right, so Bruce introduced me, and I've spent 2 decades now working with nonprofit leaders, just like you guys, who are doing incredible work in the world, but often find themselves overwhelmed by what they're trying to build. Like, it is hard work, and it is pressing, and it is never ending. And so we need to employ tactics, as it were, to survive. So before we dive in, let me ask you something. And I'd love you to stick up rather better to use the reaction buttons and stick up your hand in the reaction buttons to show me how many of you woke up this morning already thinking about that email that you need to send, that report that's overdue, that crisis that needs fixing. Yeah. Let me know. We've got 2 hands up here I can see, but I am sure that there are more of you. I'm just trying to get so I can actually see everybody in a way that is helpful to me. Right. So I think the next question then is, does this happen more days than not? Right? Is it the common way of working for you? The stress of life is not going to be solved by just working harder. Most of the time, it's actually about our systems and our processes and ways of working that are silently draining our energy every day. Today we're going to unpack where the stress comes from, and more importantly, I'm going to show you a path forward that doesn't require you to burn out in order to make a difference. So let's see what we can achieve today. So when we talk about stress, we often think about the obvious causes of stress. If you had to say, what's stressing you out right now? It would be things like, I've got this deadline, I've got a to-do, can't get to the bottom of my to-do list. I have so many commitments that need to be achieved. I've got responsibilities I can't let go. And then there is my worst one, which is the demands from others. I have a perfectly worked out plan of action for the day. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to get everything done. And then there's some email, some requirement. This needs to be done urgently. And so it all gets reshuffled, and you have to dig into the demands from others. So we say to ourselves, I just need to get this done, and then I'll be able to relax. I just need to get through the board meeting, and it will be easier. If I work on the weekends, I'll be able to stay on top of the demands. Guilty. So this type of stress I call task stress. It's stress caused by all the things that we do, the doings of life, right? But there are actually multiple types of stress. And there are 5 subtle stresses that I'm going to unpack with you now in the next section that are compounding, because we can deal with a deadline, we can deal with one type of stress at a time. But when you have multiple layers of stress, it becomes untenable and it becomes something that works you towards burnout. So I've put a little Menti poll together to find out from you which of the following 5 stresses that we're going to unpack now in the next 10 minutes have impacted you the most over the last 3 months. So Bruce is going to put in the chat, if he hasn't already, the QR code and these links. If you want to pull up your phone, pull up your browser and just log in for now. And then as I talk to each of the stresses, as you resonate with them, you can prioritize them so that you can say, actually, this one's been the most impactful in my life over the last period. And then I'll talk about the next one. You go, oh, well, actually, and reorganize as I talk about them so that you have it in front of you and you can follow along. And then at the end of that, I'll ask you to just press the submit button so that we can see the results from everybody. Okay, so this should be in the chat then for you to have a look at if I move off the slide. Okay. So let's dig into the 5 subtle types of stress. And the first one is an invisible, sneaky one that I have found the impact is the most significant. So we had a situation with a client where one of their staff members passed away suddenly. And the grief that the team was dealing with has a significant impact on productivity and teamwork in everything. And, you know, the labour law allows a certain amount of compassionate leave, but grief does not follow a regimented legal framework, right? Grief shows up in all sorts of places and times, and, you know, road rage when you're driving home. You can't control how emotional stress is going to impact you and when and all that sort of thing. And that underlying layer of emotional stress makes all the tasks, the task stress, the doing stress, much harder to deal with. You have a whole lot less capacity for anything further that could be stressful. And we're not different people when it comes to work. We're not like, this is the home life and this is the work life. We're one person. We don't switch on and off. We're not robots. So doing an assessment of what emotional stress you're bringing to the team, where you're at emotionally now, and then also next year when you're going through the year, just checking in with yourself to see what is it that I'm bringing, what is it that I'm dealing with that might be just low grade. It might not be something as dramatic as grief. For example, my mother had an operation a few weeks ago. Now, that was not major, it was scheduled, it was fine, but it still creates that low-level emotional angst, which impacts on how you are engaging with the world and everything else. The next subtle type of stress is change stress. And we know that change is the only constant, and that the world is changing at a rapid pace. But this is especially true in the non-profit sector, where uncertainty it's just a way of life. It is how we operate. And some people thrive in change, and they're quick to adapt and to learn and to commit to the new way of working and being. But for others, change is hard, especially when you consider the loss that goes with losing what was working, what was normal, what you had planned to do. We don't like to change things that don't work, because at least they are familiar, they are predictable. We still want to continue with the way that we are operating, even if it is not working for us. And adapting to change is exhausting. It takes emotional and mental fortitude to process and to learn new things. It was just mentioned earlier about how, you plan for the day, and now Lorraine gave us the example, her day has changed. Now that's a small little situation that requires a little bit of adaptability and change management, but those things compound when every day you're planning on your day and you know where you stand and it changes. That continues to build a stress in your life. Also working as consultants in the non-profit sector, I've many times had to navigate this with my team because, somebody will arrive at a client and say, oh, is it the same as last time? And I'm like, nope, every non-profit is different. Like, really? So it's constant change. Every time we're engaging with clients, it's constant change. So the question for you when you're looking at where you're at and the stress you're bringing into the holidays that you're trying to sort of relax and release, how much has your life changed this last year? We do these reflections of the year and what we've achieved, but how much of that achievement has resulted in change? And what stress has that put on your life? The next one, whoopsie, gone too far, is time anxiety. And this one has been a real biggie for me this year. We can try to adapt to the first two, but often we don't have much control over preventing the circumstances that create the stress. So there is a limit to how much we can actually, we have to manage ourselves, we can't manage the situation. But time anxiety is largely a mindset, and so we have the most control over changing it. Not to say that's easy, it's often the hardest thing to do, but we have the most control. And so I've been reading a book by Chris Guillebeau, I think that's how you say his surname, called Time Anxiety, where he explains that there are two types, and you can suffer from both, lucky me. One is existential and the other is everyday. So existential is this idea that I'm running out of time in my life. That whole concept of bucket list that was such a great movie and so feel good and everything like that has given us this framework where I have to have a bucket list, I have to do everything on my bucket list. And so we have this, I'm running out of life. I want to leave a legacy and I'm running out of time. I'm only starting my, business that I wanted to start when I was 20, now in my 40s. Right? The stress around running out of time. That's the existential one. The everyday one is like, I literally am not going to cope with today. I'm running out of time. I don't have time for everything. I don't have time to get stuff done. I have 10,000 things on my to-do list, and I realistically know that I can't achieve them all. So this pressure of, I'm going to run out of time. And that leads to a mindset where anything that is not productive, in inverted commas, is a waste of time. Rest is a waste of time. Doing the things you like doing is a waste of time because there's this constant pressure to get things ticked off, to get things done, to move things forward, to be productive. And that creates stress. It's this underlying urgency that adds to our levels of stress. The next one is trust. And I did a masterclass on trust earlier this year. So this one really should read lack of trust, because it's not the trust that is the issue, it's that when we don't have the trust, when we don't trust our team to follow through on promises, to do what they say they will, to the standard we want, then we stress about the things that we have delegated. What you'd love to do is be able to delegate it, walk away, and you can rest that it's going to happen. But this is personal experience. At 3 a.m, we remember things to check up on, and we worry about what we've forgotten to ask about. So I'm trying to improve we'll talk about the solutions later on, but I have a task app on my phone that integrates with all my devices. And the reason it's on my phone is that when at 3 in the morning I remember, oh, I forgot to ask on the status of this thing, I can put it in my phone to remind me in the morning, so that I can let it go and go back to sleep. Because when we're tracking their to-do list as well as our own to-do list, there's this low-level underlying stress all the time that you worry that somebody's going to drop a critical ball. We'll have to pick up the pieces. I don't have the time for that on top of my existing task and time anxiety. So now I'm not just stressing about my stuff, I'm stressing about their stuff. I'm sure some of you can relate. Which then leads me to the last one, which is constantly living in crisis mode. Every day brings a new crisis. You spend your time reacting instead of planning, fixing instead of preventing. You're constantly in emergency mode. And it's exhausting because you never get ahead. You always feel like you're catching up. And there are two parts to this, where things really are a crisis because planning hasn't taken place to prevent them, right? So it's become a crisis. And then the other one is where you're so used to living in crisis that you treat everything as a crisis, even if it's not. So any new donor requirement sets off your panic mode and you're on high alert, locked in, adrenaline high, competently, please note this, you're managing the crisis. You're like, roll up the sleeves. Okay, let's go. Because crisis is the only way you know how to deal with anything. But you're then living in this adrenaline high. You're living in panic mode. You're living, looking, scanning for what's the next crisis, what's going to happen. And so sometimes you create crisis so that you can operate. Because when life is not in panic mode, you kind of go, ugh, and then nothing gets done and nothing gets, you're motivated by crisis. So you have no internal motivation to actually get things done when there's no crisis. So even though things are not a crisis, you make them into one so that you can actually function. So, yeah, speaking from experience here, recovering crisis fighter. So I'm going to ask you then to have a few minutes to think about where you've experienced the most crisis, the most stress this year, over the last little while, what you have done, where you are, what do you think has sucker punched you most? And then when you're ready, click submit, and we can get those responses. All right, I see there's 3 people. Oh, 2 people. We can go ahead and you're going to respond. One of those is probably me. Logged in. So let's see what people have said. Ooh, interesting. That emotional one is a killer. It really is. That layer is something that really knocks you for a loop. And I think I'm going to have some real recommendations for this time anxiety book. I've really enjoyed reading it because it's so practical and it gives you lots of things. He has ADHD and some other issues that add complexity to it, so he addresses those sort of things as well. So that I found quite helpful. Yeah. Great. Are there any questions at this point before we start talking about, next steps?
Michelle, well, there's a request for that book again. So if you could hold it up to the screen so people can write the title up while they're thinking.
I can do that. I think that'll probably be quicker than me trying to find the chat in all of my different screens. Okay, so it's Time Anxiety, and this is the guy's name. Yeah, I can see why you need me to hold it up, because that is quite a spelling. And so, yeah. Hopefully you've got that. If you get half of it, in Google will complete the rest for you, so you're good. Okay. So where most stress management and time management advice falls short is it that it treats all stress the same way. A new productivity app or a task tracking tool is not going to address the emotional or change stress that makes all your good intentions fall by the wayside, right? And believe you me, I have tried quite a few productivity apps. It doesn't address the bigger picture. So let me tell you the story of Miriam. So it's not her real name and this is not her real picture. It reached breaking point when she was on a company wellness retreat with her organization, and she was working till late and getting up before breakfast to work to complete reports and meet deadlines that, external deadlines that were pressing on her in the wellness retreat. And unfortunately, it wasn't just that week. She'd been working weekends, many evenings, just to stay on top of things. The organization was growing, her stakeholders were happy, but she kept waiting for a quieter week to get to the end of her to-do list, pushing for the light that she hoped was at the end of the tunnel. She was on the organization's wellness committee, for crying out loud, but she was drowning, and fast. So we'll come back to Miriam, but let me address the 5 subtle stresses first. So the first one is to build your nervous system resilience. Addressing emotional change and even a bit of general anxiety is an exercise in managing and regulating your nervous system. You can't think your way out of emotional burnout. You have to regulate your nervous system first. And this means understanding your capacity and building genuine resilience, recognizing when your system is on high alert and knowing the steps to take to de-escalate yourself, right? I did a whole presentation on this at our NPO Leadership Conference this year, and I outlined how your organization can implement a well-being framework to support the well-being of your team. So let me know if you'd like me to give you that presentation to your organization or a group of people together, and help you to map out how you can engage in addressing these underlying stresses for your organization. So I'm not going to go into how we build the nervous system resilience. That's a whole nother story. But that is the key part when it comes to these emotional things. It's not about working harder, but it's about working from a healthier foundation. So in the Time Anxiety book, Chris talks about the difference between being busy and being productive. Many leaders confuse motion with progress. So he teaches that the key to overcoming time anxiety isn't finding more hours in the day. It's ruthlessly prioritizing what actually moves your mission forward and letting everything else go. Asking yourself, if I could only do 3 things this week that would make everything else easier or unnecessary, what would they be? A lot of time anxiety comes from trying to do everything and all at once. But when you identify the critical few tasks that create leverage Suddenly you're strategic with your time. Another side to this is not prioritizing ourselves. We give out of an empty cup to build a legacy for others. And I speak specifically to non-profit leaders. We're trying to make change for others, to be supportive for others. And we have to consider, where do we fit in this ruthless prioritization? A concept I've enjoyed over the last few months, that's not from Chris's book, but from Instagram, is the concept of the last is my future self. So my future self is an independent person from me, okay? Because when it's really hard to prioritize myself, it's much easier to talk about myself in the third person. I'm prioritizing this for my future self. So I ask myself, what would I need to do now when I'm like overwhelmed, I've got too many things on the to-do list and I can't prioritize what's next? I say, what should I do now that will help my future self? Doing that exercise routine will help my future self be healthy. Getting that thing off my list will help my future self be more stress-free. What it presumes is that you have identified what your future self wants, that your future self actually wants to be healthy and stress-free. So what are the goals for yourself? What is it that if you do today will move you forward so that your future self can achieve them? And the same applies when we look at an organization. What does our future organization need from us to do today in order to actually achieve what we have set out to achieve? We as a team have done some goal setting as an organization already for next year. But over the holidays, I want to unpack for myself who I want to be next year. As we achieve these goals, who am I? I can be a stressed out, adrenaline burning, midnight oil user. Or I can make a choice for something better. So I also challenge you over your holiday, what do you want your future self to look like? How do you want your future self to feel? And then it helps you to prioritize today to achieve that. To do it not for yourself, but for your future self. And give your future self a name if you want. It sometimes helps. So here's something crucial that most leaders miss. That your inability to trust and delegate is often a symptom, not the root cause. And your constant firefighting feeds the problem. You can think about it this way. When everything is a crisis, when processes are unclear, when systems break down regularly, of course you can't delegate. The chaos makes it impossible to trust that things will get done right. But if you fix the firefighting, if you stop the constant crisis, then you can start to trust more. When processes are clear, when systems work, when expectations are defined, then delegation becomes natural. Trust grows from reliability, and reliability grows from good systems. So we often say, I just need to make exercise a habit, or I want to get into the habit of clearing my inbox every day. But we're actually using the wrong word. A habit is something that is automatic without thought. So putting your socks on before your shoes is a habit. Throwing the clothes in the laundry bag or the floor robe when you take them off is a habit. Well, the habit is to stop throwing them on the floor robe and put them in the laundry without thinking about it. Like, you just do it. What we mean is that what we actually mean is that we want to create a routine that is triggered by something. A routine that requires thoughts and has multiple steps. So that exercise is like, after this has happened, I'm going to now do this routine that has multiple steps and requires some thought. But it builds into that consistency. And then when we talk about a system is a group of routines that achieve a consistent outcome. So we need to identify in our lives and in our organizations what systems need creating or even just improving in order for us to get out of that crisis mode, get out of the firefighting. Okay, I'm going to pause there for any questions, and then I will move on to the next section. Are we good? Okay. So I've learned that much of the stress you're experiencing isn't personal. It's organizational. You at home try to put routines in place for yourself, but you're fighting against a culture that doesn't align with what you're trying to achieve. I think people often have this, working from home is part of feeding into that, because I'm working at home, I can put my routines in place, I can have the things I want to do, I can, not respond to the WhatsApps. But when I'm in a work environment, I'm trying to focus, I've got it in place, and I'm being interrupted all the time. So the culture doesn't align with what you're trying to achieve. Everyone is doing the best they can. Please don't get me wrong about this. They're making it work. They're working it out as you go along. But that's the part of the problem, is we're like doing it on a shoestring. We had a big plan and now we're changing it. We're working it out. It's kind of like in the trenches. So your organization's not broken, but your systems are. Here's the beautiful part. When you fix the organizational problems, the personal stress diminishes. When you optimize how your work flows through your organization, you have more time. And when you automate repetitive tasks, you have more energy for more important things. When you implement clear processes, now you can trust and delegate. Okay, so let me break this down into 4 areas where I have seen the most impact when it comes to addressing the organizational stress or the organizational structures that create stress, so that we can address it and include it into our arsenal of support tools. Okay, so a lot of stress comes from ambiguity. Who does what? When is it due? What does done look like? Right? When these questions don't have clear answers, everyone operates in a fog of uncertainty, doing what they think is best and hoping it's right. So we're creating that low-level trust stress within the people who are waiting for things to be done, but also the people who are doing things. There's just that little bit of like, am I doing this right? It creates that stress for people. So when you document your core processes, it creates clarity. And I'm not talking about 100-page procedure manuals or all the details, like down to the nitty-gritty. I'm just talking about simple visual workflows that show how work moves through your organization. When was the last time that you mapped out how a fundraising event becomes a donation in the bank account? How do you go from there to there? Is it just by like a wing and a prayer? How a donor concept note becomes a funded initiative? Is there a process? Is it dependent on who's doing the concept note within the organization? How a volunteer application becomes an active team member? Onboarding is one of those major wish list areas for nonprofits. We have this wonderful, great plan of action, but typically the project is already started. commitments have already been made. We're already behind on the outcomes of the funding agreement, and the person is just like thrown in, we got to go, work is happening, learn as you go. And there isn't that structured onboarding so that the person has clarity and knows what's expected, and doesn't burn out in the first 6 months. So obviously you want to map out the ideal process, but even when just documenting what happens now helps you to identify where the confusion is sitting, what's creating stress, where the frustration is. Often the solution just pops out when you're mapping it out and working it out, and it's then very straightforward to implement. You don't want to be reinventing the wheel, but rather making tiny tweaks that improve everyone's life. And I think when you're looking at building a routine, a sort of a cycle of reviewing, have we got clarity on this? Is this understood? Do people, are we on the same page? You're then not constantly, but regularly improving, making little tweaks, things like that. And so it gets better over time, right? We're not trying to, put something new in. We're wanting to try and just like over time build a culture of looking for ways to improve the clarity and how we communicate that to people. So I mentioned at the beginning defining what does done look like, and this idea of defining success is a critical one. So it clearly articulates the unspoken expectations so you're all on the same page. When we work with clients, we always look at the unintended consequences of not successfully completing a step. So I literally had this conversation with a client Tuesday because they were reviewing some of their processes as part of their annual programs review. And what they had realized was that if the programs team, let's use the finance example they gave me, if they don't put in the account code on the payment requisition, it has an unintended consequence on the finance team in that there's a whole lot of backwards and forwards, creates a level of stress, it delays everything, it's a story and a half, and then they can move it forward. But to the program person, it's a simple thing. I'll get to it later. I'm sure they know where it is. I don't have time to go and open that document and look it up. It's tiny. It's one little piece of information on a form I filled out. But the unintended consequences down the line have now been unpacked for that team. And the program team have actually come up with solutions for how they want to address it, which is exactly what you want. So understanding what does it look like to have completed something successfully means that you've articulated your expectations and everybody is on the same page. The next one is consistency. So once you have clarity on what needs to be done, the next goal is aiming for consistency in the outcomes. How things are done. So not what, but how. You're looking for standardization. You're looking for building towards those routines, right? For that, you need to add what we call equipment to your process. And equipment is anything that helps make it work. So it might be a checklist, it might be a template, it might be a standard operating procedure. For using that finance example, if they have a little lookup of the codes that they need to put in as a program team, that's a piece of equipment that will help them to complete their role within that process. There are so many tools in the Google and Microsoft suites for creating automated forms. You've got the spreadsheets, there's so much functionality you can do in there. What I love is hyperlinks. So when you're doing a simple standard operating procedure and you say use this template, you make it a hyperlink so that the person just has to go to the procedure and then they can access all the pieces of equipment that they need in order to finish that procedure without having to go scratching in some document folder where things have been filed very haphazardly. You want it to be so easy that a new recruit can literally follow the process, use the equipment, and get it 90% before needing any oversight from you. Right. So then the next one is, once you have it all visual and the documents required to do the work are all laid out so you can easily see what can be reassigned or automated, Microsoft has a very cool tool called Power Automate that can automate a series of processes. So yeah, we've just recently discovered a software called Brevo for our database management and our mailings. And it automates a whole lot of what we have previously done manually. So I love watching videos on how to do things better. YouTube is my friend. And how to automate software, how to use the automation software that's there. But often it doesn't result in a change in our systems. Just watching the videos, just knowing that the software is there, because you can't imagine how best to use the tool until you have the process clearly defined. Because the process needs to be communicated very structurally to the tool. There's the setup of the tool, right? With the Power Automate, you wanted to say, if this happens, then this, then do this. If that happens, then do this. All of those steps, you need to have it actually mapped out first, which is why the clarity is the first step before you get into any of these software tools. We'll always try and test it manually first so that we know what's needed before we're using the tool, before we find a tool that suits us. So this whole map it out, what happens after each step is exactly where we are with Brevo. So we practice what we preach, right? We're mapping it out so that we can then apply it in the tool in the most effective way. But we say that the challenge with nonprofits is that everyone is different. Even people in the nonprofit do things differently. But there is a whole lot that can be standardized, can be structured, a whole lot more than we realize. If it's an aim of yours, if it's a goal, if it's something that you are looking to focus on so that you can minimize that organizational stress for the team. Then the customization for that donor proposal is just the extra 10% instead of starting from scratch every time. The process, the tools, the templates get you the 10% and you just need to do, get you the 90% and you just need to do that 10%. So what would a presentation in 2025 be without a reference to AI? Right? Maybe I can get another show of hands. How many of you regularly use AI, an AI tool to support all your work? And I see Bruce has put up both hands because Bruce has a whole team of AI tools. Holly's got her hand raised. Anybody else use AI on a regular basis? Really? So AI functionality has advanced so quickly. Instead of asking for information, we can now ask it to complete tasks. But we don't use them beyond maybe helping us write things. Because all the information required to do something useful is in our heads. Right? However, if we have identified the steps and developed the required equipment and inputs, then we can use AI for that 10% customization. So imagine saying, here are the last 3 donor proposals. here's the template we use, here's the program strategy we have in place this year, here's the donor application requirements, please can you draft the concept note? Right? So that actually we're giving it all the information that we would give an employee because we have it all formalized and we know exactly what it is that is required to do a concept note. Now, if you've learned anything about AI this year, then you would have probably learned that the prompt is what matters, right? Getting the prompt right is what's frustrating. It's what takes time. And often feels like it's so long, I might have just done the work myself, right? So my question to you is, do you have a prompt library in your knowledge base? It's the same as delegating with a team member. You have to write that initial detailed instruction email. You know, maybe you do the instruction video, maybe you have that initial meeting. You have to do that part if you're delegating to a team member. But now we do it once. Then you save it, you use it, you improve it, and you can unlock the power of AI to actually do what you want. Okay, before I go on to the next one, are there any questions on this section? You're going to come at me with AI.
My question is to everybody else. Why
not?
AI?
I think we're going to need to dig into this a little bit more next year because I would like to, you know, we're talking about AI. So in conjunction with our parent company called ASIC, we have been developing an AI tool to specifically support South African NPOs. And this is the very first sneak peek. Her name is Nancy. She's Nancy, the NPO navigator. She's geared towards micro and small NPOs who need similar types of support but don't have the resources for tailored consulting services. So when you ask Nancy something, she asks you a whole lot of clarifying questions, which gives you a customized natural language response based on details relating to your organization, right? So her back end is directed to South African resources, so you don't get the unhelpful American-centric answers, right? It's geared for the South African audience. So the AI portion is up and running, but we are finalizing access in the front end, so we'll be officially launching Nancy in February. So watch out for that. So that's our little AI plug, and Bruce is going to be unpacking all the details about Nancy in the new year. Okay, so let's go back to Miriam. Let me tell you what happened next. So we started by mapping her organization's core processes. Not everything, just the main activities that consumed most of her time. We discovered that so much of what she had to do herself could be simplified and delegated or automated. She started using Loom. If anybody's heard of Loom, it's a software an online software that allows you to record instruction videos, and it turns those videos into SOPs. So it's a lovely, lovely software. And she was recording everything she did, not everything, anything she needed to delegate, record an instruction video. She has a library now of instruction videos, and delegate all the things that she hated doing or that created stress for her, right? So that she could actually spend time in her happy place doing what she enjoyed. She paid for Copilot Pro and started using it properly. So she let go of perfect and embraced good enough. She finally had space to breathe, to spend the weekend reading her book. Sounds amazing. But here's what really mattered. Miriam's organization didn't just survive, It thrived. She set a good foundation, and they are going from strength to strength. She's finally leading again, not just managing crisis. And it was not just a once-off piece of work, but a way of working, setting templates and SOPs every time something new needs to be done, building that library, building that repository of information. So that was Miriam. And then this is the lesson I want you to take away today. There is no quieter week coming. There is no end to the to-do list. Waiting for it to get better is not going to work. No amount of positive thinking or better time management will solve system-level problems. So you need to start with your mindset. Identify where your head is at. What mindsets are holding you back? What are those stresses that thinking around time? What is it that is the crisis, living in crisis? Where is your head at in relation to those kind of things? What does it mean to prioritize your future self and your organization's future self? Tap into where is your mindset? Where do you want it to be? And then build routines that strengthen your nervous system resilience so that you have capacity to process the emotional and change-related stress. And then get ahead of the crisis so that you can map out your processes, you can streamline, simplify, automate, and delegate. The truth is that the work you're doing is too important to do it while you're burnt out. The people you serve deserve you at your best. Your mission deserves systems that support it, not systems that sabotage it. So you want to start the year off well, dealing with the underlying issues that create consistent stress so that you have the capacity to deal with the curveballs, getting that foundation level right so that you can adjust when there are the curveballs that you have no control over. Okay, that is where I'm wanting to go on here. I just want to share with you our new website. It is live, yay, after a very long time of design and everything like that, because we branded at the beginning of the year, and now at the end of the year I can reveal the website is up and running, and it has a massive big connect with us button right at the front. So if you feel like you want a follow-up conversation on this that maybe needs to be unpacked a little bit more, there is plenty of ways to connect with us on our website and set up a meeting for next year. I am not taking meetings in this last week of my of my year, but we can definitely connect next year. So that is a thank you to... Great. So there you've got my contact details. Love to connect. Thank you very much.